Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barrie Switzen, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back our guest today. I call her a serial entrepreneur. She is always at the forefront of whatever is happening that is changing our lives. And I would like to welcome back Aliza Sherman. Lisa, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
It's such a pleasure to have you back here.
Thank you.
It's been a while since we've had a conversation.
Yes.
And you originally started with the internet, and now you're into another phase of what's coming up in the world. And I'm hearing more and more about it. And I should say, cannabis?
Cannabis, not marijuana, cannabis. Yes, I started the first woman-owned internet company, as you know, back in the 90s called Cybergirl, and an organization to help women learn about the internet called Web Girls International. So that was the early 90s.
That brings back such memories.
Yeah, so I was here back then talking about the internet. I think I was even talking about television that you could interact with. We were talking about the future, and the future is here. But yeah.
But now we're into the future because not all the states are legalized for marijuana, cannabis.
Right.
And you are starting a whole new trend.
Yes. So back when I was helping women learn about the internet, because mind you, in 1990s, women didn't know what it was. They weren't using it. They made up 10% of the internet population. Fast forward to today, cannabis is like the internet was in the early 90s. It's misunderstood. It's unknown to a lot of people, or vilified. And back in the 90s, the internet was vilified. It was supposed to be a horrible thing for all of us, bad for every aspect of our lives, and now it's indispensable. Cannabis has been vilified over the decades, and it is a medicinal healing plant, and women can benefit the most from it and help others, their family, their friends, their community, by having better knowledge about the cannabis plant.
Well, let's just start back. Cannabis was originally banned, you could almost say like prohibition with the alcohol, back in, I think, 1935 or something. There's quite a history, and slowly but surely, certain states, mostly out west, are legalizing it. And from what I understand, Colorado is the most advanced, organized state in the union versus California. Even though they're bigger, they're beating them in all kinds of ways.
Well, there's a lot of things. So you touched on history. So a quick history lesson. The reason cannabis is banned is not because it's dangerous. The reason cannabis as a medicinal healing plant has been banned was because after prohibition of alcohol was lifted, there were vested interests in making sure that cannabis was prohibited. It kept certain people in jobs. The people who were policing the alcohol no longer had anything to police, so they vilified cannabis. Then two of the richest men in the United States who had vested interests in preventing the hemp plant and the cannabis plant from moving forward were Rockefeller, who had oil and gas, and hemp is known as a very good biodiesel plant for fuel.
Realize that. Okay.
Hemp can also be made into paper. And who owned timber plus most of the media back in the 30s?
It was Hearst.
Hearst. So Hearst, Rockefeller, and a guy named Anslinger, who was part of the early version of the DEA, he joined forces with two of the richest men and decided that we need to ban this substance for all of their own reasons. They all had their interests, their special interests in banning the plant. Up until that moment, Americans had cannabis sativa as a tonic in their medicine chests. It was normal to have that. Of hemp farmers, I mean, everyone dating back to Thomas Jefferson was farming hemp. All of this was banned in a blanket way with interests in any kind of industry except for human health. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with decades of misinformation, propaganda, and special interests trying to keep the cannabis plant away from people.
Well, they haven't really succeeded, unfortunately. And unfortunately, our jails are full of people that
Very bad.
have used it or sold it.
Have sold it, yes.
Mostly sold it.
Yes.
But what's interesting is there's two kinds of cannabis. Let's start with that.
Okay.
There's the THC, which gives you the high, and then there's the CBD, that is more the medicinal purpose use. Because I know one of these healthcare doctors that I've been in contact with, very interesting. I asked him about it, and he said he puts it in his smoothie every morning. And I thought, whoa, he's a natural homeopathic doctor. So, and I've been hearing more and more about this, and it's not like, oh, you can talk about it under the table type thing. It's coming out in the open.
It is. So you're talking about two compounds within the cannabis plant, THC and CBD. So backing up a little scientifically, my husband's a biologist, so I can look at this scientifically as well. So cannabis sativa has three plants under it. One is that hemp plant that doesn't produce the THC, and that's where it has amazing benefits from a materials standpoint. But also from a health standpoint, you might see hemp seeds at Trader Joe's, for example.
I buy them all the time.
Right. So that's a very good protein source. It's an amazing plant. There's the cannabis plant that we're talking about that has over 100 cannabinoids, which are these compounds that any medicinal plant you look at, including echinacea, astragalus, the things that we might buy at the health food store, has some compounds that help us, our bodies medicinally. Well, cannabis has over 100.
100?
Over 100 compounds that each has a different way of reacting or interacting with our bodies. Our bodies, now this is something that was more recently discovered in the 90s, our bodies has something called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system lays over our nervous system, over our organs, around our brain. And this system is what reacts to THC or CBD. So THC is considered the one that affects your brain and your awareness, and CBD is considered the one that doesn't. But the truth is, the plant as a whole has elements that interact with our bodies and our brains in different ways for different effects and different benefits.
All right, so if there's over 100,
Right.
how do you select which one is good for you?
Right.
And if you have a, like ALS
Yes.
or multiple sclerosis or some of these other I was going to say diseases. They're not diseases, they're ailments.
Ailments, disorders, epilepsy, all
right.
of it.
How do you know what is the proper
Okay.
dosage to take for them?
So, now I'm not a doctor, have to say that. So what we're talking about are compounds within a single plant. And within a single plant, depending on how it's bred, those compounds, it might be higher in THC, because if you think about it, when this substance was banned and when people were growing it underground on the black market and people were purchasing it, they were purchasing it thinking, okay, this is going to alter my mind. I'm going to get high. So they bred it for high THC. It's really more CBD to THC. There's a balance there that brings our body into what they call homeostasis, a balance. So having a little THC is not bad, but most of us want to be functioning. We don't want to be high all the time. We want good health. So how do you know? You have to do your homework. You have to do your research. I mean, that's why I started a brand new company to help women learn what are the parts of the cannabis plant and how do I consume that legally, safely, responsibly to get the effects that I need. Pain relief, relief from insomnia, perimenopausal symptom relief, menopause relief, all kinds of uses for a truly rich medicinal plant.
It blows my mind because it's like one plant has got so many uses.
Yes.
And it's like the scientists are all now trying to be the first to come up with the solution to this, because there is great money to be made.
Yes.
It's always driven by money. Even
It is.
unfortunately,
Money and power.
Right. So it's like, how do I benefit for my health from this?
Okay.
And you've started this company, which you call
Elementa.
How'd you come up with that name?
L stands for her, E-L-L-E. Menta for mind,
Oh,
her mind. So Elementa is a national network and resource for women to learn about cannabis and CBD, to learn about the different benefits, to learn about the laws, learn about the uses, how other women are using it for themselves, for self-care, but also for caregiving.
well, caregiving is a huge topic. That's a broad, oh my God, for the caregiver
Yeah.
and for the person who needs the
Exactly.
caregiving. Two different,
One is anxiety and stress relief, even relief from grief. The other is relief from whatever is ailing. So it could be terminal illness, trying to transition in a more peaceful way, less pain. It could be chemotherapy, less nausea, better appetite. There's a lot of amazing things. And what's really unusual, I'm a very skeptical person. I do my homework. There is good research coming out of Israel, of all places, because it is being legalized and research is being legalized. So they're getting good product and doing good reports and studies and surveys. So if you're looking for scientific evidence, look to Israel and seeing what they're doing. Because I would recommend anybody question, do your homework, find trusted sources. And we bring women together so they can learn from one another, and we bring experts to them so they can ask those tough questions. And then we bring products that they're allowed to have in their state, because it's a state-by-state legal issue.
it's a state-by-state legal issue, because I know, for example, I was talking to somebody here at the station, and he said he just came from the courthouse, and what was going on was the fact that the state that this person got the medication and the product could not be brought into another state without risk of being arrested. Now that makes no sense to me.
Well, you cannot cross state lines with cannabis. Cannabis is federally illegal. Each state is coming up with their own set of rules, regulations, and laws that is making it possible for a legal, regulated industry to take place. So for example, I am based in Alaska. Alaska has been legal for an individual to have up to an ounce of cannabis on their person in public without getting arrested, consuming in the privacy of their own home or a residence, and also grow up to 6 plants in their own home. This was fine since 1975. But
Wow.
only in the last couple of years have they turned it into a regulated industry, where now the Alcohol Control Board is called the Alcohol and Marijuana Control Board. And that means that they are paying attention. There's rules and strict regulations that must be followed. You must get licensed to do business with cannabis. So it's a whole other ballgame. You mentioned how Colorado is so far ahead of California. California was a medicinal state for quite a long time. Colorado is a recreational state, which creates a whole new set of opportunity. Alaska is a recreational state. So if you go into a marijuana shop, which is just like a liquor store, you show your ID, they just make sure you're old enough, you go and buy whatever you want. But you can't ask them, will this help my backache? Or will this help my insomnia? So when it's a medicinal state, it's its own set of rules and regulations.
Interesting.
And yet, above it all, the federal government still says it's illegal.
It's almost hypocritical. How can you have it okay in the state, but the Fed says no?
Well, that's not hypocrisy if you think about it, because the states want this. The states want this. The revenue, the tax revenue from it is
It's
helpful.
billions.
It is. I think Colorado just reached $1 billion. Alaska just reached about 1.5 million, which for a very low population state that just got started, it's not something to sneeze at. It's not the same as the oil and gas money per se, but it's meaningful enough, and it's growing very quickly. And the more that women especially learn about the efficacy of cannabis for helping our bodies and helping our entire family. Moms are using it for children with epilepsy, children on the spectrum of autism.
What
There's a
about
lot of
dementia?
uses. Dementia, yes. So there is a company called Octavia Wellness, started by a woman, Carrie Tice, whose mom had dementia. She heard that it was helpful for dementia. She began to use it instantly, literally the first time. Her mom settled and has now a better quality of life, even with dementia, because of using cannabis. And now Carrie goes to senior centers and educates our seniors, our elders, about this.
All right, so there's 1 million uses for this.
I wouldn't say 1 million. There's many uses for it, many benefits to our bodies, because this is a plant made by nature to interact in a very positive way with our bodies.
How did you find out, you did your research?
Yes.
Where did you get your information to do the research? Because it's so little.
Well, it's not actually so little. In fact, if you dig around some of the websites for our own government, you will find articles such as CBD has been known to reduce the size of cancerous tumors. That report is on one of our government's websites, or one of the governmental websites. So while our federal government says cannabis is illegal, it's called a Schedule I drug. It's up there with heroin. It's called a gateway drug, and that's what I learned, that it's a gateway drug. It's actually not. It's an off-ramp drug. I have met many women who got off of opioids, methadone, and heroin by using cannabis. And now they're fully functional. They're able to operate like anyone else, even
That's
though they
fabulous.
had an addiction. So the government is saying this is not legal. They are also the patent holders to different aspects of cannabis. They are also putting out information and doing research about cannabis in a positive way. So they have some positive, good news on their website, and yet are denying that there are good benefits from it. So that to me is hypocrisy. You can't say it's illegal and yet you're going to buy up all the patents to it so that you control it when it finally is legal. So it's an interesting time.
Which government website?
It's it's part of Health and Human Services. It's part of the Health NIH.
Okay.
Has a lot of studies, and then they have some other drug related. It's funny because literally on the same page it'll say drug abuse. It can help you with cancer and reducing tumor size. It's on the same website.
It's wild.
That's hypocrisy.
It's funny. I was talking to a friend who, back in the 70s, really smoked a lot of marijuana. Mm-hmm. And I was talking about, the fact that you were coming on, and we were talking about cannabis and how it's good. She says, oh, yes, there's a gal, she lives upstate and in Woodstock. And she said, yes, there's all kinds of dispensers. I said, well, the thing of it is that if it's THC, you can get high and you can have accidents when you're driving a car. She said, no, you can get high, but that doesn't mean, mixing it with alcohol is not going to hurt. Well, mixing it with alcohol, I think she said, would hurt you. But basically, getting high is not going to. I don't understand
Well,
this.
I think that I would always suggest and recommend, and this is part of what we do at Elementa, we can't prescribe anything. We can't tell you where to get it. We can't dictate how you live your life. But we all, as responsible adults, if we are altering our mind in some way, it's not a good idea to get behind a car. But that also means if you're angry and upset, you shouldn't really get behind the wheel of a car either. So for some people, getting high is altering enough that it's not a good idea. I would recommend when you take any medication, you have to be careful, right? And if cannabis is medicine, you have to be careful. So from a standpoint, though, if you think about what alcohol is, alcohol,
It's mind altering.
well, not only that, it's a poison. Alcohol is a poison that the reason we get drunk is and the reason we get hungover, it's dehydrating us and it's affecting the fluid around our brain, not just our brain itself. So that hungover feeling is that dehydration in our heads. Cannabis, on the other hand, you don't wake up hungover. And I'm not saying, I'm speaking again medicinally, because using it for insomnia to help you sleep instead of a pill, instead of a glass of wine, you wake up without that hungover feeling. Even using CBD, the non-mind altering portion of compound within cannabis, you sleep deeply, soundly, wake up refreshed. You don't have that grogginess.
How much do you have to use? Do you use a teaspoon, a tablespoon?
Well, so
liquid?
here's where you're getting into something that I would not be authorized to tell you, but I can tell you there's many ways to consume it. So you can have an edible.
Yay!
Yay to edibles. So you could have a brownie, for example.
Alice Pitocas.
However, I would actually say if you wanted to use cannabis and it's legal in your state and you wanted to use it for sleep, I wouldn't have a sugary snack.
Ah.
They have different kinds of tablets and capsules. They also have tinctures. So if you ever do echinacea tincture under the tongue, sublingual, think of a cannabis tincture as the same kind of thing. Or a CBD tincture. Again, not mind altering, but relaxing. CBD is anti-spasmodic, anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety. So if you're consuming that, it brings you down a notch or two, and it helps your body and your mind relax. So there's also vaping, which is different from smoking. So I'm from the era where it was pipes and bongs.
They're still around.
Of course they're still around, exactly. Pipes and bongs. But now they have vape pens. And now this is not e-cigarettes. This is vaping either oil or some kind of extraction from cannabis, but you can vape the flower and it warms. It doesn't burn. There's no combustion. It warms to the point that all of these compounds I'm talking about, they vaporize and then you inhale the vapor. Is that safer than smoking? The jury is out because we don't have a lot of research, but it certainly doesn't smell like it's burnt. It doesn't linger in the air a lot. It doesn't have that blackness that burning does. So in a sense, it feels and senses more clean. There's also the topicals. So I have arthritis in my neck. I use a topical on my neck. I have shoulder pain. I use a topical, a cream or a salve, a medicinal salve. So there's many different ways of consuming. And now that there's certain states that it's fully legal, there are chefs coming up with different dishes that you can infuse with cannabis or CBD. And now you don't have to just get the brownie or the cookie. You can get the
whole meal.
You can get the whole meal. You can get dip. You can get some savory things. There's also a product now on the market created by a woman called Levo. LevoOil.com. It's an oil infuser. You can infuse it with lavender or rosemary or sage or cannabis. And it's an appliance that you put in your kitchen, and you can make your own infusions and then cook with your oil or your butter that's been infused. And that's where you get into dosages, and there's books out there.
Oh, good.
There's recipe books.
I'm
not a cook, so I can't tell you. There's
but the recipe books already?
There have been recipe books for the last 10 years.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. And I love cookbooks. Because my question was, how much do you put in? I mean,
it varies. And the thing that you need to know, too, is very little can go a long way. We, women of a certain age, if we're not looking to get high, but we're looking for a feeling of overall well-being, sometimes the smallest amount can just shift for us, because sometimes we are super anxious and it just calms. And so 2.5 milligrams is considered a microdose, and it's effective.
Can you become addicted to this?
Well, again, not being a doctor, I can't speak as authoritatively, but I can say that for the most part, cannabis is actually not addictive. You can abuse anything. Cannabis cannot kill you if you overindulge. Alcohol can kill you if you overindulge. It can suppress your breathing. It can cause all kinds of poisoning within your system. But you'll just sleep or you'll get a dizzy if you have too much pot. So,
or you inhale it from somebody.
You can get a contract high walking down the street. Well, you've got to have some concentration of it to get inside of your system. But in terms of addiction, people have addictive personalities. Some people, chemically, it'll react in a way that's addictive, but majority of people who use it in a medicinal, responsible way, it is, I've heard, not really addictive. I do try it medicinally. I live in a state, it is legal. I do not travel with it because that is illegal, but I use it maybe a few times a month when I truly, truly need it. When you think of the medicine in your medicine chest, there are things in there that are addictive. There are things in there that you only use when you need it.
Not only is it addictive, but when my doctor wants to prescribe something, we have this big discussion about what I'm going to take and what I'm not going to take.
And the side effects.
Oh, well.
I mean, when you think about medicine that we take, it's not all safe. It's not all perfect. Cannabis goes in there with the medicine chest and everything you've got in there, but it's less addictive and it's very healthful in a lot of ways.
Now, what about the cost factor on this?
Mm-hmm.
Is it expensive? It's not going to be.
It depends.
Okay.
So it depends on where you live. So first of all, if we're really talking about cannabis, it depends where you live. So in Colorado, I think they say it's $10 or so a gram on average, and in Alaska, 22. So it really depends.
What's the difference between? That's a huge difference.
Supply.
Oh, so you don't really grow it in Alaska?
They do grow it, but there's fewer growers.
Oh,
there's
I see.
fewer
Okay.
growers, and it's taking quite a while to get up to speed. You know, as there's more product available, prices come down. Colorado's been doing this for a while now, so their prices have come down. And also now, if you're talking CBD can be shipped and can be purchased in pretty much almost every state. There's a lot of confusion on the laws around CBD. Again, CBD is a part of cannabis, like THC is a part of cannabis, but the CBD products have 3% or less THC. You can get those products and they can be pricey. For a little bottle of tincture, it could be $150, $90. I've seen some good prices on, but that's a lot.
That certainly is a lot.
Because there's risk involved, there is a big process and expense to have the right facilities to produce it. They pass that along to the consumer.
Of course.
But as more companies come on board, prices also go down. And as more states come on board, because when I first started in this industry almost 2 years ago, there were 25 states that had legalized marijuana in some form. Today, 29 states and 6 more about to try to come on board. And they're all in different stages. So some of them say, we're recreational, but you can't get it yet because we haven't started growing it yet legally. It's a little bit of a mess. But in other states, California's about to go recreational. They've been medicinal for quite a long time. So they have their pipeline because you can't go across the state line. Nevada just went recreational and they ran out of cannabis product in a couple of days.
Oh my God.
And everyone wanted to ship to them, but you cannot ship across state lines. And so they were in quite a bind for a while until the production started up again.
So even though Nevada is right next to California,
Yes.
it could be shipped across the line, across state line.
Technically it could, legally it cannot. And so I believe that as the states that are legalizing and that get online with their industry and are seeing and reaping the benefits of the tax money, that eventually can put enough pressure on our government to help them do better business and make more money by being able to go across state lines. That's where change will happen. Because honestly, our government doesn't care that it's helping people, saving lives, rescuing children from constant seizures. Children who get seizures like every few minutes of their entire lives.
That's sad.
And then a little bit of the cannabis tincture, it stops it down to maybe 1 or 2 a month. The quality of life for people has been vastly improved. The anecdotal evidence alone is mind-blowing. You said earlier mind-blowing. That's mind-blowing.
Now, obviously, this has all been documented someplace.
Oh, it's everywhere. You go onto the internet and you'll see so much. Now, always question what you find on the internet. And that's, again, back to why we're building Elementa. We believe women as caregivers, as the epicenters of care. We should be taking care of ourselves. We take care of our families. We take care of our friends, our communities. We're really the center of making change in the cannabis industry. Even if we're just a soccer mom or a grandma or a businesswoman who has nothing to do with cannabis other than she wants to feel better. So Elementa is bringing quality information and pointing women to the good studies, the good resources, the better products. Everyone's jumping on this bandwagon, but who's the one who's vetting? Who's going to tell women who make the healthcare decisions in the home, who make the purchases of wellness products in the home? Who's going to tell her which way to turn? Well, that's what our company is about. So we are helping guide her to the right information and including whether or not she can do this legally in her state. And a lot of families are relocating to Colorado and other states to get the medicine they need.
Well, that's very interesting. Sounds like you should be in the transportation business.
Or tourism business as well. A lot of people are taking vacations now specifically to Colorado or to Alaska to be able to indulge in a beautiful setting.
Okay, so I see we're going to have to do some research on this. There's been a lot of talk. There's a lot of business. It's $1 billion business. The problem comes in is that a lot of the banks don't want to touch the money.
Right, they can't. Banks cannot touch the money.
But
yes,
how do you process the money to pay for all your bills?
Cash. Now, if you touch the plant, that's how they define somebody who deals with cannabis. If you touch the plant, a grower, a dispensary, a testing facility, laboratory, then you're doing something that's federally illegal, and banks are insured by the federal government, so their hands are tied. They cannot deal with money from illegal activity. If you're like Elementa, my business, it's an ancillary business. We're on the outskirts. We do not touch the plant. We do not have any cannabis on the premises when we hold our in-person meetings for women. We do not sell cannabis online when we have our online forums for women. We are information. Information is not illegal. So if you're ancillary, you can bank. If you're not, you pay cash. So I have clients such as a marijuana shop in Alaska. They pay me in cash because that's all they can do. And I am a marketer. I do digital marketing. That's my other business. Elementa is my new startup, and I hope that will take off and help a lot of women.
I'm sure it will.
But if I'm dealing with somebody who touches cannabis, 9 times out of 10, they're paying in cash.
Then, if they're paying in cash, do you have to pay in cash to the next person, or no, because you're not touching it?
I'm not touching the plant. So I'm only being paid for digital marketing services. Okay. On the Elementa side, we work with brands who want to reach our women across the country. So we have gatherings, physical in-person gatherings for women to talk to each other and to speak to experts. We're having them by the end of this year in 11 cities across the country, happening regularly. So women can come together and learn about cannabis from other women in welcoming, safe spaces where they feel they can speak openly. So brands, companies, want to reach women like our women, and so they pay us a sponsorship fee to sponsor our events, or they pay to sponsor content that we write on our website, or they pay for some research. They may want to send the survey to our women to find out what do they prefer, smoking or vaping. That kind of information is valuable when they're producing new products. So there's a business side to this that isn't the touching of the plant.
Okay, so when you do your IPO, what I find interesting about this whole process is that there's a lot of colleges starting a whole degree on marijuana, cannabis, how to grow it, how to take care of it, etc. I think this is a great thing.
I would suspect they're state-funded colleges, but there are many places where you can learn about every aspect of the cannabis industry. There is Oaksterdam in Oakland, California, which is all about cannabis and cannabis business. There is an organization called Women Grow for women who want to learn about the business side. So Elementa is all other aspects of a woman's life. And an organization like Women Grow is for the professional and business side, if you want to start a business or get a job in the industry. So there's many resources out there to learn. And again, Elementa's job is to figure out which are the best ones. But a reputable college or university that's starting up a course, that's a pretty good thing.
I think it's fabulous. It's not only a course, it's a whole degree. I mean, in northern Michigan, they're starting with a whole degree. It's like, whoa.
Well, that's because they're going legally, recreationally legal. So it makes sense that once a state says, yes, we want cannabis to be legal in our state and we want to prosper from it, there are so many angles that people can go into it. That's also a caveat. You never know who's going into it because there is opportunity there, there is money there. So who's going to vet that and who's going to make sure that the people are trustworthy? There's a lot of shady people coming in as well.
Well,
and
it's like
anywhere
any
where
business.
wherever there's money, you're going to have people who are doing business well, and you're going to have people who are going to take advantage. So hopefully people will do things in a healthy and a happy and a very honest way.
Serial entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
What made you start this business, Elementa?
So when I was looking for a way to expand my digital marketing business, and a friend of mine was looking to expand her PR business and asked me, well, what industry should I get into now? I'm paid by clients to look at future trends, and I had noticed that cannabis was quite on the radar. Still early. And I said, well, why don't you get into the marijuana industry? Meaning do PR. And then I thought, why don't I do digital marketing in the marijuana industry? And as I did my research, I realized there was more opportunity than simply digital marketing. As I did my research and read about the medicinal benefits, which nobody taught us back in the 80s and 90s, I thought, maybe this can help me. I was living with chronic pain. I had insomnia. It was wrecking my life. And I thought, let me try this and see if it's okay for me. And it's legal in Alaska, so I was able to obtain it completely legally. I tried a little, just a little. I slept like a baby for the first time in years. I woke up the next morning, I cried because I had relief. If you live with chronic pain, you know that when you don't have chronic pain, it is a miracle. It's also very unfamiliar, and it's sheer relief. So I thought after, why didn't I know about this before? The next thought was, why don't other women know about this? And I began seeking out women to find out who was involved, who knew about this, who was doing good work in this space, and how else could I help bring good information about good medicine to more women. And that's where Elementa was born.
Phenomenal. It's funny when I talk to women that I know who are in pain, and I say, why don't you do some CBD? And they look at me like, what are you talking about, girl?
Because of the stigma. If you think about decades of propaganda, decades of misinformation, decades of our own government telling us this is bad when it was not true. It's ingrained. I mean, I still have fear, even though I know it's medicine. I live in a state where it's legal. I'm open and honest with my family, and it helps. And I use it only occasionally as needed. I still have fear. It's just ingrained in our system. It's ingrained in our society.
You have fear of doing it, using it because it's illegal in some places, or fear that you're going to become addicted to it?
I have no fear of addiction. I don't have an addictive personality. You can become addicted in a sense to alcohol. You can abuse it and become an alcoholic. So I did not have that fear. I had a fear that, yes, it's illegal. I also have preteens in my home. And on the one hand, you say, don't drink, but then you have your glass of wine. Well, you say, don't do drugs. And yet, here you are using something that's considered a drug. So the conversation I have at home is, it's a medicine. It is safe for adults. In some circumstances, it is given to children for great benefit, but it's a medicine, and it's not something you should have until you're older and your brain is fully formed, which is about 25 years old.
I'm finding when I do research on the marijuana cannabis area, I know you're supposed to call it cannabis versus marijuana.
Do you know why?
No.
That's an interesting story. This is historical as well. So in the process of trying to vilify the cannabis sativa plant, that's the scientific name, the cannabis sativa plant, part of the propaganda in the 30s was to associate it in two ways. To take this medicinal plant and vilify it by saying it is now marijuana, which is tying it to Mexican immigrants or dirty Mexicans. I am Mexican, so I can say this. That was what it was about, is to say no decent white person would ever want to do something that those dirty Mexicans are doing. So it became vilified and tied to Hispanics. Then it was vilified one way further, African Americans. So the idea was, if a white woman consumed it, she would get together with a black man. Or if a black man were to consume it, he would take advantage of a white woman. I'm just using safe language here. But it was terrible. It was horrible the way that they were using
They were twisting everything.
They were twisting it, but they were twisting it against certain populations, just as another way of suppressing them, as another way of tying crime and bad things to Mexicans and to African Americans. And so that has continued. If you look at our prison population, who is really getting imprisoned over cannabis more than anyone else? It's our minority populations, which frankly is a very complex side of this industry, because they could get out of prison and they cannot do business in an industry that they know about because of a felony conviction.
Oh, that's very interesting.
It's a painful and it's a very sore subject in this industry. So another piece of it too is making sure there's representation, making sure that these diverse voices are at the table as this industry does grow. Because we don't want it. Those of us in it, those of us who have been in it for years, don't want this to become big pharma.
Oh, it's going to become big pharma.
They're already buying up cultivations.
Right. I mean,
but how can we infuse this industry with higher values. I love how I say infuse, cultivate, grow, and higher values. But it's the truth. I mean, how can we, right now, this is the moment for us to really create the direction of an industry. More women getting involved puts more heart and soul and care into the cannabis industry.
Well, I think more women are becoming involved in the business because they can, versus there's still that little stigma attached to it. So it's kind of like women are making forays. I've been reading more and more about the women who've started businesses and stood on their own, and they have succeeded. I mean,
well,
it's phenomenal.
There are amazing women in this industry. The more women see women in the industry, the less fear, the more they feel safe to enter the industry. And we bring a different set of values to the industry. I have a website that I publish called Her Canna Life, C-A-N-N-A, Her Canna Life, and it's all profiles of women in the industry. And that was my way of saying, women are here. We deserve to be here. We're doing amazing work. We have come to cannabis, each one of us, for different reasons, because of different things. And we are building businesses that are based on very strong positive values. Many of us simply want to help other people. We want successful businesses, big businesses.
IPOs.
Hey, Elementa is a business, and we want it to grow. But what is wrong with doing good as you're making a living and growing a very successful company to create jobs for more people?
I don't think there's a thing wrong with it.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with it.
In the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I think the most important thing for all of us to remember is that we need to educate ourselves about the things that we do in our lives that can be positive and helpful. We should look at our lives and decide what's right for us based on the evidence. And we need to educate ourselves so we can make change in this industry, and we can affect change, get our government to realize that this is a medicinal plant, that we deserve good medicine, good information, and that we all can thrive if we can change the way that attitudes are right now about cannabis. I think that more than anything, the more knowledge we have, the more good we can do for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, and for our world.
Aliza, thank you so much. I'm so glad you came. I mean, I've learned a lot, and I hope you have learned a lot. What kind of business are you going to start for the cannabis world? Love to hear from you. Write us here at the Women's Connection.